Hey y'all, welcome to Adventures with Aggie, brought to you by Coco's Coffee House. Today we have our next episode of our Lacrosse feature where we're speaking with John Yeager. He's a professor and positive psychology consultant as well as a performance coach who works with coaches, athletes, and teams at all different levels: youth, high school, college, Olympic, and professionals. He's going to share with us some exciting news about his book, who has just been released, called The Coaching Zone. He's going to tell us why he wrote it, what inspired him to write it, and what it's about and why you should read it. So please welcome John Yeager. John, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Aggie. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. I'm so excited to hear more about your story. But just to get started, can you kind of give me a little bit of background on who you are and what you do?
Well, I'm originally a Boston native, and I now live in north central Indiana. And one of the funny things is when I came out here, my family in 2000, I was a big New England Patriots fan. And if you're anywhere close within 2 hours of Indianapolis, that's not a good thing. So I had to kind of, as they won several Super Bowls and the Red Sox won several World Series, I never saw those back in the Boston area. They were all out here, but I had to do it kind of secretive or clandestine. But anyways, yeah, I grew up in the Boston area and then eventually taught in several different school districts and coached lacrosse and soccer. And then at the same time, started working with Yeager Leadership to work with teams, athletes, and also with businesses and schools at that same time. So I did an awful lot of different things for a long period of time. Eventually, I ended up at Boston University where I had done my doctoral work, and I worked in the School of Education there in human movement. So that was really exciting. And in 2000, left Boston and came out to the Culver Academies in north central Indiana, where I coached lacrosse for a while, and then also ran the character education programs, along with still traveling, doing my Yeager Leadership stuff.
That's awesome. You've been everywhere. You've done lots of things. I love it. And I love Indiana. I did travel there several times growing up for the Indy 500 though, but very frequent visitor there as well. Cool. Okay. Well, let's start with a bit of fun here. So how did you get into lacrosse? I know you hold several records in your career. So I guess, how did you start that and how did that impact what you do now?
Well, I ran track to start off with, and I realized I wasn't very good at running the mile, and I really didn't enjoy it. During my junior year, a friend of mine came up and had a lacrosse stick, and he had an extra one. He gave it to me, and we just started playing catch with it, and just all of a sudden fell in love. And that was it. Changed my life there too. And so I played my junior year in high school. Then my senior year, I was a goalie. Mm-hmm. I was very fortunate to continue to play in college, club lacrosse, and then I played for a while in the professional indoor lacrosse league until my body gave out on me. But it was, it was a great run. Really, the impact that it had on me really was strongest back in the mid 70s. So I'm an older guy, but my senior year at Boston State College, which is now UMass Boston, we playing Bowdoin College in a game, and it was our first game of the season, and I was hoping that I could get All-American honors that year or North-South game honors, and the coach of the Bowdoin team was on that selection committee, so this was a big game just for us as a team, but also for me individually. So I got out there, and I played absolutely awful. I wish the coach could have taken me out, but the problem is my backup goalies weren't ready for prime time yet. So I had to, if you've ever been in a situation you want to get out of, that was it. But, went back into my dorm and grieved for the next day or two. Couldn't go to classes because of the grieving. But redemption, I think, was on the mark for that following Thursday when we were playing Middlebury College at our home field again. Now, picture our home field. And our home field was around 3.5 miles away from our Back Bay Boston State campus. It was in Brighton, Massachusetts, behind a Ground Round restaurant, which used to be a chain years ago. And it was called Smith Field. It was a town field. There was a lot of dirt, a little grass, some glass broken into there. And there was the lacrosse field, separated by a chain link fence and the pristine fields of Harvard University. So we were really, that was just a juxtaposition of both there too. And so we got there, and we got there late because it was Red Sox home opener and we couldn't get through the traffic. So Middlebury's already there. They're out there and they're in their nice navy blue uniforms and very prim and proper, actually short haircuts and stuff like that. The coach of the other team, Rob Pfeiffer, looked like he was a ex-military, high and tight haircut. We're a bunch of hippies. So picture me with my hair parted down the middle, headband, hair down to my neck, doing a peace sign. That was our team. And especially one of our players, Ronnie and Jemmy from South Boston. Ronnie, to pump us up before the game, shaved half his beard off to try to motivate us. And I'm not sure what that did or not. We're a bunch of an interesting crew. So we got into the game and I was really excited. I had a good warm up. First shot of the game goes in on me. I'm saying, okay, I'm okay. Okay. And then second shot goes through my legs. It goes in. And suddenly this, what I call the drunken monkey, which is these thoughts in the head, just going back and forth, going crazy and saying, I don't have it. I'm an imposter here. And I tried to work my way through that. And I slowly worked my way through that. And the other team got the ball again. And player came right down on top of me, broke through our defense, took a shot. I guessed low and put my stick low, ball right into my stick. And I'm going, oh, wow. Picked it up, cleared it out. We went all the way down and scored. And we won the game 6-2. I made the next 30 saves. And it was like the ball was like a beach ball. And it's the first time I had ever been in the zone in my life. But that's not the most important part of the story. The most important part of the story happened in the second period when Coach Pfeiffer called a timeout. So he yelled out, Middlebury timeout, was his gruff voice. And so we're dutifully running over to our bench. The Middlebury players are running to their bench. And remember Ronnie with half the beard, he runs to the Middlebury bench, works through the Middlebury players who are dumbfounded of why he's doing this, jumps on the back of the coach of the other team, Pfeiffer. Pfeiffer turns around, Ronnie comes off the back, takes off his helmet, still has half a beard. They look up at each other and they begin to cry and weep. And they're like happy tears, but nobody knows what's going on. I'm going in a Boston accent, Ronnie, what are you doing? What's going on? Well, the backstory. When Ronnie heard the voice of Pfeiffer calling a timeout, the last time he had heard that voice was 6 years before in 1969 when he was in Vietnam, because Pfeiffer was his platoon commander and they hadn't seen each other since. And to this day, I remember that as one of the greatest sports moments of my life, of talking about optimism and resilience and hope, and that connection of so important. And I actually became good friends with many of the Middlebury players who went into coaching and teaching afterwards, and became a good friend with the coach of the other team because of that one event. That shifted everything for me about sports, about the importance of connection. And that's kind of how I've gone since then, whether I've worked with athletic teams, businesses, or schools.
That's amazing. That's such a cool story. I love that. I say this on a lot of my episodes, like the power of sport. Like nobody knows what that means, like the power of sport. People just throw it around all the time. But that's a really great example of how sport does bring people together, regardless of background or what's going on in the world and stuff. But sports going to be there, which is so cool. But I love that. I love it. I want to listen to more stories. I want to listen to stories all day. I love it. Awesome. Well, let's jump into Yeager Leadership. How did this start, and what do you do for athletes and teams?
Well, it started just through my networking over time. And that's the advice I'll give at the end for anybody going into the sports industry. It's meeting people and going through this Kevin Bacon 6 degrees of separation, where you end up knowing somebody from here or there. And with social media, that can help more. Basically, with the Yeager Leadership, we started looking at how we can best work with coaches, athletes, and teams to kind of bring out the best in them in a variety of different ways. And one of the things that really differentiates ourselves, and I've included this in the book too, is that we really look for athletes, teams, and coaches to have a higher level of self-awareness and to really begin to look at what are the motivations, what's the passion, what's the purpose of what you do out there, to get the why. And the why is so important. You hear about that all the time. And basically to get them to the point of really, looking at high performance, but also looking at enjoyment and satisfaction, and to see how all of those things come together. And so we really employ two different distinguishing pieces. One is called psychological capital. We help coaches, athletics, and teams look at PsyCap. And PsyCap, if you think about human capital, which is knowledge and skills that coaches, athletes, and teams have, then they have social capital, which are the relationships. The third piece is psychological capital, which is made up of hope, efficacy or confidence, resilience, and optimism. HERO, H-E-R-O, okay, based on Fred Luthans, who's a researcher in this area. So how can we get people to understand where they are in those four different areas, and at the same time, how can they excel and move forward? The second area that we distinguish ourselves with is polarity thinking. And polarity thinking is about both and situations and not about either or. So if you think about politics, okay, you can think about a lot of polarizing types of things that are happening in our nation right now. Well, there's a lot of polarities that are happening in sports, today, such as individual and team. It's not individual versus team. It's individual athletic development, and it's the team. And it's not that one is necessarily better than the other. People will say, well, there's no I in team. Well, there is. There is the development of the athlete. And if you over-focus on the athlete to the neglect of the team, that's the problem. But if you focus so much on the team that the athletes get lost, then that's an issue. So we work with different ways of getting teams to map out varieties of different types of polarities so that they can be self-directed. And what ends up happening is it helps them look at their strategic objectives for the season of things that the coach would have wanted them to come up with anyways, but the teams did that. Really, really exciting. In many ways, it's boardroom to the locker room. Strategies that are used in the boardroom are going to the locker room, as opposed to typically our locker room strategies shooting that up to the boardroom.
I love that approach. People always say it starts from the top down, if everybody's not on the same page, you don't function as well together, which is totally true. I guess your book and everything else. And then the other thing that I wanted to say, kind of as a follow-up to that, there's no I in team, and people kind of, I guess they associate certain people more so with the team rather than the team itself. I guess an example, after the Super Bowl, the New York Times, I get news alerts, right? On my phone. And I got an alert that Tom Brady had won his 7th before I got the alert that the Buccaneers had won the game, which is so crazy. That was super weird to me. I was like, the game is over? I was just making sure I was all on the right page. But that's the super kind of polarizing part, I think, that you're talking about as well. It happens everywhere. It happens with Tom Brady. It happens at all levels of sport. That was really, I don't know if alarming is the right word, but it was very odd, I guess, when I was reading that afterwards. But great. I love it. I love your approach. I think it's super cool. I guess moving into now, I always ask a COVID question. Sorry if you don't like COVID questions, but I feel like I ask one in every interview. But I guess, how has COVID-19 affected what you do? Have there been any new developments that you think you'll keep into the future?
Well, there's been opportunities, of course, that have come out of this, and it's dramatically changed how I do business with coaches, athletes, and teams, where my work is now remote, and really, just trying to make those micro connections by being face to face in person. And I remember trying to do, was with UMass Lacrosse team, trying to do polarities online, which is very different than doing it with easel paper on the board, going back and forth and getting back chat and stuff like that. So I've found that that's changed there, and also working with athletes and teams. Those are all gone to Zoom meetings there, and starting to make some plans for coming out of this, hopefully through the summer. We'll see. And once again, you need psychological capital for this, with hope, and resilience and optimism. And where the opportunities come out, Aggie, is in that I'm finding that the mental health aspects of this for coaches, athletes, teams, their parents are huge these days. Okay, and I think I look at 3 C's here, like, first of all, connection, and that building trust, showing empathy, and making sure that athletes matter during this period of time, because schedules are so off. Whether a team is, while they may not be playing. I was working with one college hockey player who's saying, I'm not sure if we're playing this weekend or not, or another individual saying, I'm looking forward to the Olympic trials. I just hope they have an Olympics if I make it through the trials. And so really working with them through that whole process, listening to them. And this is also a time with youth sports where coaches, have to even listen closely, even more so, to parents who are really anxious about a variety of different things of their kids having opportunities to play. Are they going to miss a year? Or if they're looking at recruitment issues, what's going on with that? Things like that. So, I look at that, and I look at empathy that comes in there. And I think of empathy in 3 different ways based on the work of Daniel Goleman in his article, The Focus Leader, in the Harvard Business Journal several years back. And cognitive empathy is really for a coach to really understand the perspectives of his or her athletes. The second is emotional empathy, which is actually feeling what they're feeling right now. Now, as a coach, you might you got another season coming up. You're not going away possibly, but this might be the senior year for your athlete at the high school, college level. And some athletes are doing a 5th year because of eligibility, allowabilities, and some aren't able to do that. So how can that coach go past that gap, that empathy gap, to really be there emotionally for the athlete? And the third, which is almost, if not most important, is empathic concern. It's basically for the coach saying to the athlete, I am here for you unconditionally, no matter what. Basically, I love you. I'm here for you. And that goes miles. And I think it's critically important now. And even though coaches can be suffering too and needing to get support, this is a way for them to keep that going. And I've seen those. That's one of the opportunities that I've seen since COVID's hit.
For sure. I love that you mentioned the empathy piece. I was thinking about it. I was hoping you were going to go there. I'm in a class right now at NYU called Leadership in Crisis Situations. And all of our lessons go back to empathy or care or understanding people. And that's really the thing that ties the bow on top, I think, in so many situations, especially right now, and the past year and stuff. But empathy. It's one of those words that I think a lot of people have realized is way more important than we realized before 2020. That, along with pivot and adapt and everybody else's favorite words. But empathy. It's a great word. I think about it a lot now, though.
And Aggie, too, with that is that it's still appropriate to hold athletes accountable for what they do. And this brings in, this concept of rational compassion. You can be empathetic and understand the perspectives, but still hold the line. Be rationally compassionate. This is based on some of the work that Paul Bloom's done at Yale in a book called Against Empathy. Not that he's against empathy, but he says we might use too much emotional empathy when we really need to hold the line. So it becomes a balancing act with the coach.
Definitely. I love it. Awesome. Well, let's go into the coaching zone. What inspired you to write your book?
Well, I've been involved in sports for most of my life, and and ended up coaching for almost 45 years. Didn't play as long, but after working at the high school, college, and in the indoor lacrosse professional level, as a coach and a player, I've accumulated the network of people and other coaches that I've met throughout the years. And at the same time, the stories that I've developed, the exercises that I have helped to develop. And I just said, well, this was finally a natural, it came. And I'd been working on this probably for the last, 3 years. And then when COVID hit and some of my business backed off a little bit, then I went full bore to finalize and getting this ready to launch in mid-March. And so that was kind of the epiphany that I had to get into that. And I connected through another coach, a young man called John Kuna, who's a licensed mental health consultant and former track coach. And he is also a co-author with me with the book. And we've kind of worked together to take some of his, understandings and my more seasoned understandings of coaching, looking at what's the research in sports psychology and positive psychology out there. And in some ways, almost going out there to get the reader, the coach, healthfully confused. Because most coaches end up coaching based on how they were coached or maybe how they were parented. Or, and so that may work out great, but what I do is I try to challenge the reader, to take it to another level. This is not necessarily a rah-rah book that you go open it up and go into one sitting with. It takes a while to go through, but it provides the reader with the opportunity to help the coach grow in a variety of different ways, whether they're really new to coaching or they've been a veteran or seasoned for a long period of time.
Definitely. Let's talk about the readers. So are you targeting these coaches of all different levels? Are you targeting athletes or a little bit of both, I guess? I guess everybody could use a bit of coaching every now and then. So who's your target audience?
I'm targeting new coaches and seasoned coaches, but who fit the criteria that they're lifelong learners, that they have a growth mindset, that they're willing to make shifts and changes. Bob Quinn wrote a great book called Building the Bridge as You Walk on It. It's about, leadership. It says when we change ourselves, we change how other people see us and how they respond to us. We change ourselves, we change the world. And that's the legacy of living in the fundamental state of leadership. So it's getting either youth coaches, high school, club, college, and professional coaches, who want to kind of, go a little bit deeper into some of those different areas. And I ask the reader 3 questions. Do you wonder how you can make a better difference on and off the field as an influencer with your athletes and teams? Secondly, what strategies, you want strategies that can increase your self-awareness, your wisdom, your expertise. And the third question I ask is, do you wrestle with balancing individual athlete development in team performance? And what I do throughout the book is eventually get to that answer so that the coach who reads the book can establish his or her own voice based on how they answer those questions.
That's awesome. That's always a question that I ask on my show too, is how do you tailor your coaching or your training to meet the needs of the individual athlete to benefit the whole team and themselves?
Right.
That's awesome that you're focusing on that as well, because they always have interesting answers. It's like, well, I don't know. We focus on the team part, and then we just tailor each other's, I guess, the individual player to meet the team, which I don't know if that's the best way to go about it sometimes, but I guess it depends on the coach themselves. And maybe after they read your book, they'll understand it and have a great answer to that question.
In many ways, it's about thinking about how you think about how you coach. Term would be metacognitive, which is a fancy term. It's just really going, how do I think about this instead of just going through the motion?
For sure. Awesome. Well, let's see. What are you looking to accomplish for the reader? You kind of already mentioned this. And then what makes this book different than other coaching and leadership books that are out there?
Well, it's a comprehensive step-by-step guide, which is really, it actually takes some skills that are activities and exercises that are used in business, and moves that over to sports. And the emphasis is on 3 different principles. One is coach self-management. the capacity for the coach to be self-aware, to understand their strengths and their shortcomings, their passion and their purpose. How well do they think from a perspective of being a system one or a system two thinker? This is about system one is about being, acting just automatically and doing things. And that's what we want to see for our athletes out there. And a lot of coaching decisions are automatic, and that's really good. But sometimes we do things automatically that we haven't corrected, that we've done wrong in the past. So we need to slow our thinking down, which is system two thinking. Okay. And so what the book helps to do is to get the coach to understand how do they look at these two coaching voices and when do they use each voice at the right time for the right reason in the right situation. Then the second part of the book is about leading and empowering athletes. It's about, how do you cultivate connections? How do you effectively challenge them and use feedback, whether it's appreciation feedback, it's coaching or skill building feedback, or it's evaluation feedback. And once again, it's using the right feedback at the right time for the right reason. So I'm trying to nuance this a little bit more. Not that a coach is going to be on the field or on the ice or on the court saying, wait a second, hold off, let me take a look at the book right now. Okay. But it's designed to get them to try some different things. And the third principle, and I really love the title to this third principle, is the team dance. It's understanding the rhythm and flows of the team, okay, that deal with culture, it deals with continuity, institutional memory of a team, and transformation, making changes in that way. And so based on a lot of Goleman stuff that I mentioned before, that helps to differentiate that. At the same time, bringing in psychological capital and talking about that. How can coaches build their own hero, hope, confidence, resilience, optimism? How do they help athletes build their own? And how do you build collective team or team psych-cap too? And then working with polarity thinking. Okay, and basically we have 7 different exercises in the book that really focuses on both and situations. Now there's not all situations are both and. There's a lot of either ors out there. Okay, who you're going to play in a game and stuff like that. But something like for a coach, confidence and humility. Well, you don't want too much of either, but you want to have a dynamic balance where they energize and they oscillate among each other. Okay, and go moving back and forth, knowing where you are at the right time there too. Or direction and empowerment. Okay, providing direction. How much does a coach do I provide direction? How much do I empower? Do I micromanage too much there? Okay, or do I leave it all up to the team? Okay, and how do you get to that sweet spot that we look at with that?
Definitely. I want you to keep going, but I don't want you to spoil your whole book. I want to hear more. I've read some snippets and stuff, but it's so cool hearing it come straight from you. I don't know. I love it. I want you to keep going, but it's all good. I won't have you spoil the whole book on the podcast. That would be bad. But awesome. Let's talk about the people that I guess you've interviewed to make this what it is. So I believe you did around 50 interviews. Was there one that stood out to you in particular, or was your favorite or the most impactful? And can you just kind of tell me about that process?
Well, yeah, and it was knowing so many coaches and finding these not trends, but just these consistencies and non-negotiables that made part of really effective coaching, which is so interesting. So I interviewed coaches and some sports scientists and some sports psychologists. And 2 I'd mention here is one is Brian Kelly. He's the head football coach at the University of Notre Dame, which is around an hour north of where I am. He's in South Bend. And what I really enjoyed about interviewing with him is looking at that, when he brings in athletes each year between the ages of, 18 or 19 years old, and looking at their resilience that he's really worked a lot in trying to see, if some athletes may be more resilient than others, and how do you actually convey feedback to them that's appropriate for them, at that time, where some can take different types of feedback a little bit better than others there too. And I found that was fascinating how he's worked with that and developed the program over, I think, the last 11 years that he's been at. at Notre Dame and, built nationally ranked teams over that period of time. A quote I said to him, how can I best convey feedback to the players to get them to learn from their mistakes? Which is an art. It's not one size fits all, because we're talking about different approaches to each athlete that you see out there. The second is Catherine DiLorenzo. She's the Middlebury College up in Vermont women's field hockey coach, and they've won 4 Division III national championships. And I interviewed her for a variety of different aspects of the book. She was fascinating, and is one of those interviews that I didn't want to stop with. And near the end of the book, we talk about culture drivers, such as 4 culture drivers. One is what drives cultures. One is by creating. One is by collaborating. One is by using control, and I'll explain what that means. And the 4th is competing. And this is based on a lot of the work that Bob Quinn and Kim Cameron have done at the University of Michigan's Ross School for Entrepreneurship. And so I'm equating this now to sports. And basically, the creating piece out of for Catherine is that, they're always learning out there. They're always innovating, trying new things, and learning from their mistakes. And so it's not an emotional thing. You make a mistake and you learn from that, and you go from that, whether the coach makes a mistake, the athlete, or the collective team does. The second is collaboration. And she really emphasized that each player matters, and each player is known to each other player on the team. That's really, really important. So there's not a nanosecond of doubt that comes up when there's an issue that goes on. Well, I don't care for her. No, it's not there. It's just that they've worked that through. So, and the athletes have a voice in the choice. She talks about, in halftime of a game, saying if they're having a difficulty, and she'll ask the team, well, what are you seeing out there? And then she goes to after one athlete shares something, she goes, I never thought of it that way. Good, let's make this shift. That's incredibly empowering to athletes. The third is control, which means pay attention to details, roles, routines. And the 4th is compete. Well, they compete. Okay, they are perennially near the top of the NESCAC division and in the national D3 national scene that we see out there. But I found that she was able to incorporate all those 4 culture drivers. She does her homework. She takes it very, very seriously. Okay, and she talks about it that she loves coaching, she loves her athletes, and basically her athletes love her.
That is super powerful. I think empowerment and powerful, I guess those are the words I kind of took away from
yes.
Hearing you speak about that interview. It's so cool. I think it's awesome when there are coaches that prioritize all of those things at the same time, because I don't think that's a very common thing, right? Like people find their thing and they're like, I'm good at this, I'm going to coach this way. And then it's really cool to see that she's actively thinking about those 4 pieces that are important. And I guess you can tell that the team appreciates it, I guess, just based on your story and stuff as well. That's awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah, it's and so those 2 stuck out with me, but there's another 48 or so that were just really exciting to listen to. I mean, if I may, one other brief one. There was one person I interviewed. He was a English teacher and a hockey coach at an independent school in Massachusetts. And I had interviewed him once when he was working a summer job at Compete Strength and Conditioning in Norwood, Massachusetts. And he talked about coaching, and he said the most challenging coaching experience that he ever had with a coach with him, who was coaching him, was when he was in high school, and coach said, hey, you got a spot on the roster. You got a spot in the game. I'm going to play you. Well, he never played him. Then somebody would get hurt, and he'd bring in a freshman up. He never got to play. And the coach really, and basically, finally, what this player's name, this coach's name now, his name's Dean, and he just said, if the coach could only just say, coach me up, what do I need to do to get out there? But the coach never did that. So when Dean became a head coach, and he was coaching, I'm thinking a freshman or junior varsity team at this school, there was a young athlete out there that had never skated before. And there were no cuts on the team. And so he just worked with him to the point where he got not necessarily proficient with his skates, but got out there, and there was a time where he just went into the corner of the boards and really was able to dig the puck out, and the team went nuts. No, they were losing the game by 6 goals, but they went nuts. And that's all about Dean. And Dean was able to work through what he had learned from his coach, for good or for ill in this case, and turn that around in his own coaching. And that's the legacy that we have as coaches. And I feel for me, that's a legacy of me giving back, of what I've learned over time, people that I've connected with, and I still learn from the younger coaches too.
Definitely. I was speaking in another interview with a blind cricket coach, and we were talking about the impact that a coach has on an athlete's life compared to a math teacher or even their parents. There's a different kind of trust and relationship with coaches. That's exactly what you're talking about. And I think that's a really special relationship, right? Because coaches are constantly telling you what to do and how you can be better, but that's like appreciated. And I think that in some relationships, that's not always their favorite thing or what they want to come out of that.
Sure, exactly.
But yeah, I think that's so cool. I love talking to coaches. I love talking about coaching. I think it's super fun. Yeah, great. I love all the stories you've told. They're so fun. Awesome. Well, let's go. I guess my last real question for you. I always end my shows on advice. So what's one piece of advice you would give to young people or students like me looking to start a career in the sports industry?
I think it goes back to networking and relationships. Just what you're doing right here is just huge networking, and I found your podcast through Nikki Maroney, who's doing some stuff with you. And I was Katie Maroney's teacher at Culver Academies, and you had interviewed Katie for some things in the past. I think it's networking and relationships, doing this over time, and also doing some things that you think you might like to do and trying some different things out. And that's where I think internships are huge. Okay. And if they can be paid, that's great. But if they're not, just to do that, to build that up. And as you build that up, you build up your own voice. So you may have gone, and be in a sports marketing major or a sports psychology major or whatever the area is. But I think what's really important is how does your voice fit in there? And eventually you end up building your own job description over time. And you may be able to be moving back and forth, but the common denominator is human behavior. Okay? And that the mere fact is that we get to work with other people in those different areas. How can I bring my expertise in there? I need to know about organizational behavior. If I'm doing this, okay, I need to learn about some of the soft skills, that are not necessarily soft anymore. We need to have those out there and to put those together. Once again, as I said, the Kevin Bacon's 6 degrees of separation. I think that's really, really important.
For sure. I appreciate all pieces of advice that I can get right now. I love it. Cool. Okay, so last one. How can people find your book? When is it coming out? How can they get in touch?
Well, it's launching the week of March 22nd. Okay, and it'll be on Amazon, both the paperback and Kindle version. In the meantime, you can go to my website, which is www.thecoachingzonebook.com, thecoachingzonebook.com. And that tells a little bit about the book, gives kind of a preview to that. You can sign up for newsletters, and I'm going to be running some courses that go along with the book once the book is launched there too. And also my email address is john@yeagerleadership.com, john@yeagerleadership.com.
Amazing. I'll link the link to your website in the comments so people can find that, and then definitely reach out, and I can pass along your email as well. But John, this was awesome. Thank you so much for giving us a little bit of a sneak peek into what's coming up on March 22nd.
Thank you very much, Aggie. I really appreciate it.
John, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'll link the coaching zone in the comments for anybody who wants to go check out the book and order it. Give it a read. It's really awesome. Tune in for next week. We're going back on Adventures with Aggie's Road to Tokyo. We have 3 more Paralympians who are working on qualifying for the Tokyo Paralympics in just a few months. So tune in on Monday for our Road to Tokyo.